It began as a whisper, a subtle tremor in the usually unshakable corridors of Buckingham Palace, a murmur that barely reached the ears of the public, yet carried a weight that would soon crash into the world like a storm. One minute, the royal family appeared as it always had, regal, distant, and almost untouchable, a centuries-old institution with rituals and rules that seemed immovable. The next, the very foundation of succession, the invisible thread that determined who would inherit the crown, who would carry the weight of history, and who would be remembered in the annals of monarchy, was suddenly, almost violently, altered. In one swift, unprecedented move, King Charles III made a decision that would shock the globe. Prince Harry, once considered a prince with a place in the line of succession, was removed entirely. Just like that, the heir who had captured public affection, who had walked the balance between royal duty and modern life, was erased from the line that had defined his life since birth. The news did not trickle in slowly, nor was it softened by careful phrasing or diplomatic explanation. The announcement, whether through an official statement, an insider leak, or a combination of both, hit the world like a thunderclap. Headlines flashed across screens. News channels abandoned scheduled programming to dissect every word, every implication, every possible motive. Social media erupted with speculation, outrage, and disbelief. Ordinary citizens, royal enthusiasts, and casual observers alike were left grappling with the enormity of what had happened. For many, it was incomprehensible. How could someone so visible, so central to modern perceptions of the royal family, be stripped of a role he had never actively sought to relinquish but had always been born into? What drove King Charles to take such an extreme step, and what did this mean for the monarchy itself? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But beyond the shock and the headlines, there was a deeply human story unfolding. This was not merely about titles and rules, nor solely about media coverage or public opinion. At its heart, this was a story about a family, about relationships strained and fractured over decades, about expectations that clashed with personal choices, and about a man who had lived his life in the glare of public scrutiny only to be cast aside when the most private of betrayals, or perhaps misunderstandings, surfaced. Prince Harry, a man who had once been the embodiment of the modern royal, relatable yet regal, charismatic yet flawed, beloved yet scrutinized, now faced a reality that few could imagine. What would it mean for him, for his wife, for their children? And more broadly, what did it mean for the institution that had survived wars, scandals, and revolutions, only to face its own crisis from within? It is tempting to reduce this event to a series of talking points. Harry's previous media appearances, the couple's move to America, interviews that sometimes criticized the monarchy, and public statements that drew both admiration and ire. But such a lens misses the complexity, the emotional gravity, and the unprecedented nature of this removal. In centuries of British monarchy, the line of succession has been remarkably resilient, altered only by deaths, abdications, or occasionally acts of parliament. To remove a living, adult royal from the line is almost without precedent, and to do so suddenly, without public warning, sends ripples that extend far beyond the palace walls. It raises questions about authority, about fairness, about loyalty, and about the very nature of legacy in an age when information travels faster than tradition. To truly understand the significance of what has just occurred, we must first step back and examine the man at the center of this storm. Prince Harry has lived under the shadow of history since the day he was born, his every action scrutinized, his every word analyzed. From childhood, he was taught about duty, about the weight of lineage, about representing something far larger than himself. Yet, as he matured, the world watched as he simultaneously embraced and resisted these expectations. Military service, charity work, public engagements, and moments of personal rebellion painted the picture of a prince who wanted to honor his heritage while carving out his own identity. The world cheered his initiatives, sympathized with his struggles, and often debated the tension between his personal desires and the obligations he inherited. And yet, no one could have predicted that this delicate balance, already precarious, would be so abruptly disrupted by the ultimate exercise of royal authority, removal from the succession itself. For King Charles, this decision was not made lightly, nor was it likely born from a single incident. Behind closed doors, the pressures, the calculations, and the historical implications would have weighed heavily. To understand why Charles acted, we must consider the pressures he faces. Maintaining the dignity and continuity of the monarchy, navigating a modern media landscape that amplifies every perceived slight, and balancing the interests of a family that is, at times, deeply fractured. The removal of Harry cannot be seen merely as punishment or reaction. It is a strategic, decisive act, signaling both the assertion of authority and the protection of an institution that has endured for centuries. And yet, despite its rationale, the human cost is undeniable. Bonds between father and son, once strained but still present, are now irrevocably altered. Trust has been shattered, and a public once fascinated by the charm and relatability of Prince Harry now witnesses a royal family grappling with conflict and imperfection in real time. From the public's perspective, the immediate reaction is a mixture of shock, empathy, outrage, and curiosity. Who can truly remain neutral when a son is publicly severed from a line he was born into? How does one reconcile the ceremonial sanctity of monarchy with the very real emotions and experiences of those who live within its constraints? Social media, with its instantaneous reach and unfiltered commentary, becomes both a mirror and a magnifier, reflecting public sentiment while amplifying every rumor, every whisper, every assertion of motive. Analysts scramble to interpret the palace's moves, historians debate the precedents, and ordinary people weigh in with personal reflections on fairness, loyalty, and family. Each voice adds a layer of complexity, creating a chorus that is as diverse as it is passionate. And yet, for all the public spectacle, there is an inner story, one that rarely makes headlines, but is perhaps the most important of all. Behind the polished appearances, the media statements, and the historical context, there is grief, confusion, and a profound sense of dislocation. For Prince Harry, this is not merely a political or ceremonial matter. It is the erasure of a part of his identity, a removal from a narrative that has defined him since infancy. For his family, it is a confrontation with loyalty, duty, and the sometimes painful decisions that leadership demands. For the monarchy itself, it is a test of resilience, adaptability, and relevance in a world that is rapidly evolving, where tradition and modernity are constantly in tension. The story does not end with the announcement. In fact, it is only beginning. As the shockwaves spread, new questions arise. How will Harry respond in the immediate term? What are the implications for Meghan Markle, who has long been a polarizing figure in public discussions of the royal family? How will the public perceive this act of authority, and how will it shape the narrative of the monarchy in the coming years? Each question carries with it uncertainty, tension, and the potential for drama that is as human as it is historic. The removal of a prince from succession is not a mere administrative act. It is a story about power, legacy, family, and identity, a story that demands attention, empathy, and careful observation. As we journey into the depths of this unfolding saga, we will explore the decisions, the motivations, the emotional toll, and the broader ramifications of King Charles's action. We will meet the key players, examine the history and precedents, and attempt to understand the human experience behind the headlines. We will analyze the reactions, the media frenzy, the public discourse, and the international attention that this decision has provoked. Most importantly, we will seek to uncover the emotional truth of what it means for a man, a family, and an institution that has shaped the lives of millions for centuries. The stakes are enormous, the emotions are raw, and the story is far from over. In the chapters that follow, we will peel back the layers of history, privilege, expectation, and personal struggle to understand exactly what has happened, why it has happened, and what it might mean for the future of the British monarchy. From whispered palace corridors to global media screens, from family tensions to public outrage, this is a narrative that blends the personal with the historical, the emotional with the political, and the human with the institutional. As the world absorbed the shock of the announcement, the ripple effects became impossible to ignore. Conversations erupted everywhere, from living rooms and workplaces to digital forums and international newsrooms. People debated not just the act itself, but the context surrounding it. How had a son who had served his country, who had brought attention to veterans, mental health, and social causes, suddenly become a figure deemed unworthy of succession? How did the weight of royal expectation clash with personal freedom in ways that seemed almost inevitable, yet devastating in their execution? And perhaps most pressingly, what did this mean for the perception of the monarchy itself, an institution that relies not only on tradition, but also on the careful maintenance of public trust and admiration? The emotional complexity of the situation is staggering. Prince Harry has always occupied a unique space in the public imagination, a royal who could straddle two worlds, a modern figure rooted in age-old customs, yet willing to challenge them when necessary. His military service, his charity work, and his candid discussions about personal struggles positioned him as someone relatable, someone human, someone who brought the monarchy down from its pedestal and made it more accessible. And yet, that very relatability, that willingness to confront and question the system from within, may have played a role in his removal. To some, his actions could be seen as a breach of decorum, a disregard for duty. To others, they were acts of courage and self-assertion. The tension between personal identity and inherited responsibility, between love and duty, between public expectation and private truth, has reached a dramatic apex with this unprecedented decision. It is also essential to consider the broader context of the monarchy in the modern age. The institution is no longer insulated from scrutiny or immune to criticism. Every action, every word, and every decision is amplified, dissected, and interpreted by a global audience. In this environment, the balance between preserving tradition and accommodating change becomes perilous. For King Charles, the challenge is immense. Maintain the continuity and integrity of the crown, uphold centuries of precedent, and at the same time navigate a world where public perception is as powerful as any royal decree. Removing Prince Harry from succession is not merely an act of familial discipline. It is a statement, a recalibration of authority, and a moment that will define Charles's reign in ways both immediate and long-lasting. Beyond the institutional and political dimensions lies the profoundly human story. Prince Harry is not merely a figurehead or a symbol. He is a husband, a father, a son, and a brother. Each of these roles is intertwined with deep emotions, loyalties, and expectations. To be publicly removed from the line of succession is to experience a form of erasure, not just of titles, but of belonging, identity, and inherited purpose. The personal ramifications are enormous. The strain on familial relationships, the reconsideration of personal and public identity, and the navigation of a world in which one's place has been dramatically altered. For Meghan Markle, the public scrutiny and personal challenges are compounded as she navigates a landscape of criticism, loyalty, and her own role within the family and the public eye. Their children, meanwhile, inherit a narrative fraught with tension, scandal, and uncertainty, one that will shape their understanding of family, privilege, and legacy for years to come. Media outlets have seized on every angle. Analysts dissect every phrase from official statements. Historians contextualize the move within centuries of royal tradition, and commentators speculate on the motivations, alliances, and conflicts that may have precipitated such a drastic measure. Social media magnifies the emotional stakes, turning private pain into public spectacle and creating a feedback loop of opinion, outrage, and debate. The world watches not just for the drama of royal intrigue, but for the human consequences, a father and son at odds, a family under pressure, and an institution confronting its own fragility. The unfolding narrative raises profound questions about power, loyalty, and the human cost of tradition. What responsibilities do individuals bear when born into systems larger than themselves? How should authority be exercised when personal relationships and institutional imperatives collide? And how do the choices of one individual, whether a king asserting authority or a prince asserting independence, reverberate across family, society, and history? These questions are not academic. They are immediate, visceral, and intensely personal, resonating with anyone who has experienced conflict between expectation and desire, duty and self, loyalty and truth. As the initial shock gives way to deeper analysis, one thing becomes clear. This story is not solely about monarchy, media, or celebrity. It is about the human condition, about how relationships, identity, and authority intersect under extraordinary circumstances. It is about a father and son, both shaped by history, expectation, and public scrutiny, caught in a moment that challenges the very definitions of family and duty. It is about a woman, a wife and mother, navigating her place within a world that is simultaneously adoring, critical, and unforgiving. And it is about an institution centuries old, attempting to reconcile its traditions with a rapidly changing world, where transparency, accountability, and personal agency demand recognition. In the chapters that follow, we will explore the events leading up to this unprecedented removal, the key figures involved, the reactions both public and private, and the broader implications for the monarchy and the individuals at its center. We will examine the pressures, the motivations, and the emotional landscapes that shaped this moment, and we will attempt to understand the profound consequences for everyone involved. The story is as much about emotion as it is about history, as much about personal struggle as it is about institutional authority, and as much about human connection as it is about ceremonial duty. This is a moment that will be remembered not only for its shock value, but for its enduring significance. The removal of Prince Harry from the royal line of succession is a story of power and consequence, of love and betrayal, of expectation and identity. It is a story that challenges assumptions, provokes reflection, and demands empathy. It is a story that reveals the fragile balance between public role and private self, between inherited responsibility and personal freedom, and between the demands of history and the imperatives of the heart. And so, as we embark on this journey, it is essential to recognize that we are not merely observers of royal protocol or media spectacle. We are witnesses to a human drama, unfolding in real time, with stakes that are both intensely personal and historically significant. The decisions made, the emotions felt, and the actions taken in the wake of this removal will resonate far beyond the palace walls, shaping perceptions, relationships, and legacies for years to come. This is a story of family, power, and identity, a story that is as compelling as it is consequential, as emotional as it is historic. The full scope of what has just occurred, the motivations behind it, and the consequences it entails will unfold in the chapters ahead. Each section will bring us closer to understanding not only the event itself, but also the intricate web of human emotion, history, and strategy that surrounds it. This is a narrative of unprecedented decisions, of hearts and minds caught in tension, and of an institution grappling with its own evolution. To comprehend it fully, we must delve deeper, look closer, and listen carefully to the stories, reactions, and truths that define this moment. The morning air was unusually crisp at Buckingham Palace, yet inside, tension hung thick, palpable, almost suffocating. It was a day that no one in recent memory had anticipated, a day where tradition clashed violently with modernity, and where history would be made in the most public and dramatic fashion possible. The palace press room, usually a scene of calm order, buzzed with activity. Journalists, both seasoned and fresh-faced, waited with bated breath. Cameras clicked and lights flashed, but the anticipation on the faces of those present suggested something far weightier than another ceremonial statement or philanthropic announcement. Something unprecedented was about to happen, and the air was electric with expectation and anxiety. Across London, media outlets scrambled to confirm the details. Television anchors spoke in hushed but urgent tones, their scripts trembling with the gravity of the situation. Radio stations interrupted regular programming, and newspapers printed emergency editions that flew off the presses before the ink had a chance to fully dry. Social media platforms erupted, hashtags trending before the official announcement could even be posted. The world seemed to hold its breath, collectively aware that a royal precedent, centuries in the making, was about to be shattered. The announcement itself, when it finally came, was brief, formal, and utterly unyielding. King Charles III, with the steady authority expected of a monarch, formally removed Prince Harry from the line of succession. No prior warning, no gradual statement of intent, just a declarative action that reverberated with the weight of history and the sting of personal consequence. The language of the decree was carefully measured, each word selected for precision and impact, yet underneath the surface, the emotional undertones were unmistakable. This was not merely a political or ceremonial maneuver. It was a deeply personal decision, one that would ripple through family relationships, public perception, and international discourse. The immediate response from the palace staff was a mixture of shock, confusion, and disciplined composure. Courtiers and aides, trained for decades to anticipate protocol, found themselves navigating an entirely unprecedented scenario. The removal of a direct heir was uncharted territory. There was no playbook, no precedence, only the stark reality that the line of succession, carefully maintained and recorded over centuries, had been altered in an instant. Whispers circulated among the staff, theories proliferated, and for the first time, even the most experienced palace officials felt the unsettling weight of unpredictability pressing down upon them. Outside the palace, crowds gathered. Some were curious onlookers, drawn by the sheer magnitude of the moment. Others were loyalists, supporters of the monarchy who felt a mixture of pride and anxiety as the news broke. And yet, there were dissenters, critics who saw the announcement as emblematic of an institution out of touch with the modern world, wielding authority with cold detachment and punitive force. The tension in the streets mirrored the tension within the palace, a physical manifestation of the broader cultural and emotional upheaval the announcement had triggered. Meanwhile, social media exploded with speculation, outrage, and empathy. Millions of posts flooded timelines across the globe, dissecting the decision, analyzing the king's motives, and debating the morality and necessity of such an unprecedented action. Memes emerged almost instantly, mixing humor with biting critique, while opinion pieces were published within minutes, their headlines brimming with both shock and curiosity. The world seemed to collectively attempt to process the news, to reconcile centuries of tradition with a reality that was both immediate and deeply human. Amid this chaos, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were reportedly blindsided. Sources close to the couple described a scene of disbelief and hurt, mixed with a simmering sense of betrayal. For Harry, who had long navigated the pressures of public life with a combination of charm, resilience, and candid transparency, the removal struck at the core of his identity. It was not simply the loss of rank or precedence. It was a severing of a lineage, a form of public erasure that carried profound emotional consequences. Meghan, meanwhile, faced a maelstrom of scrutiny, as public attention inevitably turned toward her role in the unfolding drama, whether justified or not. The couple's inner circle was reportedly scrambling, attempting to manage both personal and public responses, aware that every word, gesture, and public appearance would be dissected for hidden meaning. International reactions began to pour in as well. Royal commentators, historians, and political analysts from across the globe weighed in, providing context and conjecture in real time. Some framed the action as a necessary assertion of authority, a move designed to stabilize the monarchy and clarify the chain of command. Others interpreted it as a reaction to perceived disloyalty, a calculated step to maintain control over a family member who had increasingly acted outside established norms. Headlines in major newspapers captured the drama in stark, emotionally charged language. A king's ultimatum, the prince who lost his place, tradition upended. The story quickly dominated not only British news but international headlines, capturing the attention of a public fascinated by the personal and political dimensions of royal life. Yet beneath the surface of media coverage and public speculation lay deeper, more intricate layers of human emotion. Family dynamics, long strained by public scrutiny and private disagreements, suddenly became central to a story that had previously been treated primarily as ceremonial. Relationships between siblings, the ties between parents and children, and the unspoken expectations of duty versus personal desire all came sharply into focus. This was a family under pressure, its internal tensions laid bare on the world stage, with millions of witnesses observing every reaction, every statement, every nuance. Even as official channels provided statements and explanations, unanswered questions proliferated. Why had King Charles chosen this moment to act? What specific actions or decisions had precipitated such a drastic step? How would this affect the public perception of the monarchy in the long term? And perhaps most pressingly, how would Prince Harry and Meghan respond? Not just publicly, but privately, emotionally, and strategically? These questions drove both media coverage and public discourse, creating an ongoing narrative that was as compelling as it was unsettling. The day unfolded with relentless intensity. News cycles moved with unprecedented speed, capturing live reactions from analysts, public figures, and ordinary citizens alike. Discussions about the impact on royal protocol intertwined with debates about personal freedom, media responsibility, and the moral implications of power. Across social media platforms, experts and laypeople alike dissected every detail, drawing connections to historical precedents, previous royal conflicts, and broader societal trends. The story became a lens through which the world could examine themes of loyalty, authority, and the balance between tradition and individual agency. As evening fell, the weight of the announcement did not dissipate. Inside Buckingham Palace, private conversations unfolded behind closed doors, filled with a mixture of strategy, reflection, and raw emotion. Plans were made, messages were sent, and the careful choreography of public perception continued, even as the personal consequences remained deeply felt. Meanwhile, the world outside remained fixated, the shock of the news evolving into ongoing curiosity, analysis, and debate. This chapter of the unfolding saga establishes the scale, impact, and emotional resonance of the royal announcement. It highlights the immediate consequences for Prince Harry and his family, situates the event within the broader context of global attention, and frames the complex interplay of authority, tradition, and personal agency that defines this unprecedented moment in history. The story is only beginning, and the reverberations will continue to unfold in ways both personal and institutional, as the monarchy grapples with the ramifications of a decision that has shocked the world and altered the course of a royal lineage forever. The news reached Prince Harry not through a private conversation or a subtle warning, but via the inescapable echo of media frenzy. His phone buzzed incessantly, notifications piling up faster than anyone could read. Social media platforms erupted, friends and family messaged with a mix of shock, support, and concern, and news outlets inundated him with inquiries. There was no moment to process, no buffer between the reality of being removed from the line of succession and the immediate, public spectacle of it. In those first minutes, the world seemed to close in, and for Harry, it was a storm unlike any he had ever faced. Inside his residence in California, the atmosphere was tense. The normally calm and private household now hummed with a mixture of urgency and dread. Advisors and aides moved quickly, attempting to manage communications, draft statements, and contain the fallout. Yet no amount of preparation could insulate Harry from the raw, personal impact of the announcement. The feeling of being erased from centuries of lineage, of being formally declared outside the sphere of authority and legacy that had defined his entire life, struck deeply. It was not simply a matter of titles or precedence. It was a confrontation with identity, heritage, and belonging. Emotionally, the response was complex. Anger, disbelief, and sorrow intermingled in unpredictable ways. Harry, who had always prided himself on a certain stoicism in public, found himself grappling with private vulnerability that few had witnessed before. He thought of his parents, the lessons and expectations instilled from childhood, and the public scrutiny that had followed him every step of the way. Each memory now seemed layered with the weight of loss and separation, and the once familiar contours of his family's legacy felt suddenly distant, almost alien. Meghan Markle's presence, meanwhile, was both a source of support and tension. Their partnership, which had already endured relentless media attention and public scrutiny, now faced a new test. Meghan, who had always maintained a careful balance between private life and public engagement, was forced to navigate the immediate media storm while simultaneously providing emotional support to her husband. Reports suggest that she encouraged him to step back, to breathe, and to allow himself time to process. But even with such guidance, the sense of personal upheaval was unavoidable. The couple's inner circle reportedly held emergency meetings, discussing legal options, public statements, and personal strategies for managing both the immediate crisis and its potential long-term effects. Friends close to Harry described the situation as devastating yet clarifying. For years, he had struggled with the dual pressures of duty and personal autonomy, attempting to reconcile his public role with private desires and convictions. Now, the removal from succession was a stark, public acknowledgement that his choices had consequences beyond mere headlines. They had tangible, historical implications. For some, the action was shocking. For others, it was a confirmation of fears that Harry's increasing independence and willingness to speak candidly about family dynamics could provoke such a decisive response from the monarchy. The psychological toll was significant. Isolation, though self-imposed in part, became a refuge and a necessity. The prince reportedly withdrew from non-essential public appearances, focusing on family, mental health, and private counsel. He reflected on past events, from his early childhood under intense media scrutiny to the more recent challenges of life abroad, attempting to reconcile a sense of personal agency with the constraints of a royal identity he could not fully abandon. Each reflection seemed to underscore the weight of the moment, the gravity of being publicly, formally, and irrevocably removed from the line of succession. Analysts of royal behavior noted that such a removal carried profound implications not just for Harry, but for the entire institution. The monarchy, while historically resilient, now faced scrutiny not only from the media, but from historians, cultural commentators, and the global public. The action posed questions about authority, fairness, and the balance between private family matters and public duty. For Harry personally, the announcement was a moment of acute vulnerability, a public stripping of privilege layered with the private sting of familial estrangement. In response, Harry reportedly engaged in lengthy consultations with legal and strategic advisors. Discussions ranged from potential public statements to the implications for charitable work, financial arrangements, and personal branding. Every decision carried symbolic weight, every word risked amplification, and every move became a strategic consideration. The pressure was unrelenting, and yet Harry had long been conditioned to navigate high-stakes situations with care and deliberate thought. The removal from succession, however, introduced a level of complexity and personal significance that few outside his immediate circle could fully comprehend. Amid this turmoil, family dynamics were further complicated. Prince William, now the primary heir, maintained a carefully neutral public stance, but private communications, according to insiders, were marked by tension and unresolved conflict. The siblings had long experienced both closeness and friction, with past disagreements resurfacing in the shadow of this dramatic event. The emotional undercurrents of sibling rivalry, loyalty, and obligation suddenly gained unprecedented visibility, even as the public narrative focused primarily on the formal aspects of the removal. Friends and close confidants of Harry observed a shift in demeanor. Where previously he had been outspoken and at times confrontational in interviews and public statements, there was now a measured introspection. The removal appeared to catalyze a reevaluation of priorities, of identity, and of the meaning of legacy. Sources suggested that Harry began to contemplate new ways to exert influence and maintain relevance, independent of formal royal titles. His charitable initiatives, public appearances, and media engagements were recalibrated to reflect both the constraints imposed by the removal and his desire to continue effecting meaningful impact on global issues. At the same time, public sympathy emerged in significant numbers. Millions expressed support for Harry and Meghan, framing the removal as excessively harsh or emblematic of a monarchy struggling to adapt to modern realities. Social media campaigns, opinion pieces, and interviews collectively contributed to a narrative in which Harry was seen not simply as a former heir, but as an individual confronting extraordinary institutional power. This public response, while offering some solace, also added layers of complexity, as every comment, gesture, and statement risked being interpreted as either defiance or reconciliation. The chapter of immediate personal fallout highlights the emotional, psychological, and practical consequences of the royal decision. It captures Harry's shock, the grief of estrangement, the complexity of spousal support, the recalibration of public and private identity, and the broader implications for family dynamics and global perception. It sets the stage for subsequent developments in which Harry's actions, reactions, and strategies will continue to shape the unfolding story, balancing personal agency with the enduring influence of history and tradition. As the news of Prince Harry's removal from the royal line of succession spread like wildfire, Meghan Markle found herself thrust into a maelstrom of emotion, strategy, and public scrutiny. Unlike Harry, who was contending with the immediate personal impact of the decision, Meghan faced the simultaneous challenge of managing both her own emotional response and the intricate web of public perception that seemed to tighten around her with every passing hour. Her reaction was a delicate balance between restraint and righteous indignation, calculated poise and private fury, as she navigated one of the most unprecedented moments in recent royal history. Inside their California residence, Meghan's immediate instinct was to protect. She moved quickly to ensure that her family, Harry, their children, and their inner circle, remained shielded from the worst of the media frenzy. Advisors, staff, and close confidants described her as a whirlwind of activity, simultaneously coordinating legal counsel, public statements, and crisis management while offering emotional grounding to Harry, who oscillated between shock, anger, and disbelief. Every phone call, every message, every whispered strategy meeting was a high-stakes maneuver, a calculated attempt to regain some semblance of control in a situation where power had seemingly been stripped away by royal decree. Emotionally, Meghan's response was a mixture of protective instinct, indignation, and strategic calculation. Those close to her noted that while she outwardly maintained composure, inwardly there was a storm of raw emotion. She reflected on the years of relentless scrutiny, the constant media attacks, and the subtle, often invisible pressures of navigating a life perpetually under observation. In her mind, the removal of Harry from succession was more than an institutional decision. It was a personal affront, a symbolic gesture with profound implications for both of their identities, futures, and legacies. She understood, acutely, that the story would not be confined to private conversation or discreet communication. It would become a global spectacle, dissected, debated, and sensationalized at every turn. Meghan was not one to respond impulsively. She had long cultivated the ability to translate personal trials into strategic action. Her approach to the crisis involved meticulous planning, assessing legal avenues, considering the timing and wording of potential statements, and evaluating how the narrative could be shaped without appearing reactionary or desperate. Every word, every movement, every interaction with the media was carefully weighed. Friends described her as embodying both a maternal and tactical presence, fiercely protective of her children while simultaneously aware that her own reputation and influence were under scrutiny. This duality, combining intimate concern with public strategy, was central to her response. Part of Meghan's concern was how the removal would affect the children. While Archie and Lilibet were far removed from the formalities of succession, the ripple effects of this unprecedented event were impossible to ignore. Meghan contemplated the psychological and social impact on their family unit, reflecting on how history, tradition, and public perception intersected in ways that could shape her children's understanding of identity, belonging, and power. She became intensely aware that, in addition to managing her own emotions and Harry's reactions, she was also negotiating the narrative that would define their children's experience of the royal institution from the outside. Publicly, Meghan's approach was measured but unmistakable. Through carefully orchestrated appearances, statements, and interviews, she conveyed a sense of strength and composure, signaling that while the royal decision was significant, it did not define their family's identity or limit their agency. Her poise was described by commentators as both remarkable and strategic. A deliberate effort to reclaim the narrative and assert autonomy over a situation in which traditional royal structures sought to impose a form of symbolic power. Observers noted that Meghan's demeanor sent a clear message. She would not be passive in the face of institutional decisions that threatened to marginalize her family. Behind the scenes, Meghan engaged in private discussions with advisors about potential next steps. This included exploring legal recourse, strategizing about media engagement, and identifying allies who could amplify their perspective in ways that balanced transparency with discretion. Sources indicated that Meghan was particularly focused on maintaining credibility and authenticity while countering narratives that framed the couple as either victims or antagonists. Her approach reflected a sophisticated understanding of both modern media ecosystems and the enduring influence of royal tradition, blending personal conviction with strategic calculation in a way few could match. Friends and confidants described Meghan as experiencing a mix of silent fury and pragmatic determination. She reportedly spent hours analyzing past events, considering how previous interventions, media coverage, and family dynamics had led to the current moment. This retrospective reflection informed her future planning, ensuring that every response was grounded in both context and consequence. Meghan understood that in the court of public opinion, perception often outweighed fact, and she acted to position herself and Harry as proactive agents rather than passive subjects of royal decree. In addition to emotional and strategic considerations, Meghan also faced the scrutiny of public sentiment. Social media reactions ranged from sympathetic to critical, with pundits, journalists, and commentators weighing in on every possible angle. Meghan's careful management of her public persona became crucial, as every post, interview, and appearance could be interpreted as either a challenge to tradition or a reaffirmation of personal agency. She was acutely aware that in a world where narrative is currency, maintaining control over her voice was essential to protect both family and legacy. Meghan's perspective in this chapter reveals a multidimensional response to an extraordinary event. It captures her emotional depth, her strategic foresight, and her fierce protective instincts, offering a window into the complex realities of navigating royal upheaval. While Harry contended with immediate personal fallout, Meghan engaged with a broader landscape of influence, perception, and legacy, balancing private emotion with public responsibility. Her response highlights the intricate interplay between personal experience, public scrutiny, and institutional power, illustrating a rare moment in which private life and historical precedent collide with intense force. This chapter establishes Meghan as a central figure not only in the unfolding story of succession removal, but also in shaping how the narrative will be perceived, interpreted, and remembered. Her actions, decisions, and emotional journey will ripple through the remaining chapters, influencing both immediate developments and long-term consequences for the family, the monarchy, and the global audience watching closely. It is a testament to resilience, strategy, and the delicate art of navigating personal conviction within the strictures of history and expectation. Within the walls of Buckingham Palace, the announcement that Prince Harry had been removed from the line of succession sent shockwaves through corridors that were usually steeped in tradition, protocol, and a carefully curated public image. For years, the monarchy had operated on centuries-old principles of hierarchy, duty, and decorum. But now, a decision of such magnitude demanded not just procedural execution, but deep reflection, strategic planning, and, most importantly, management of internal and public perception. The royal family, accustomed to presenting a unified front, found themselves navigating a web of emotions, historical expectations, and the immense pressure of global attention. King Charles, at the center of this unprecedented move, faced a dual challenge: exercising authority while mitigating the risk of familial and public backlash. Sources within the palace indicated that Charles approached the decision with a mixture of calculated resolve and personal contemplation. Though he understood the historical significance of removing an heir from succession, he was also aware of the potential emotional fallout for Harry, his younger son, and for the family's collective image. Advisors reportedly briefed him on the legal, symbolic, and diplomatic implications, emphasizing that every action and word would be scrutinized worldwide. Queen Camilla's reaction added another layer of complexity. While maintaining her public composure, insiders suggested that she grappled privately with loyalty to her husband and her own role within the family's legacy. Observers of the royal household noted that Camilla has long been regarded as both politically astute and emotionally resilient, capable of navigating the delicate balance between personal conviction and public expectation. In this moment, she played a crucial role in providing counsel and mediation, helping to coordinate communication and anticipating the potential ripple effects within both domestic and international contexts. Prince William, meanwhile, faced his own emotional and strategic challenges. As the new focal point of succession, his position became both more secure and more scrutinized. Yet William's private response reportedly included a mix of relief, tension, and concern for his brother's well-being. Family insiders suggested that while the relationship between the brothers had been marked by both affection and friction over the years, this decision forced William to confront the complexities of loyalty, duty, and personal belief. Every communication he had with Harry in the immediate aftermath was carefully measured, balancing familial support with recognition of the institutional hierarchy that now defined their roles more starkly than ever before. The palace staff, too, played a critical role in managing the immediate consequences. From private secretaries to communications officers, everyone was mobilized to navigate both the procedural requirements and the intricate messaging required to address an unprecedented event. Briefing notes were drafted, press statements carefully reviewed, and internal communications circulated to ensure that all branches of the royal household were aligned. The level of coordination required reflected the gravity of the situation. Removing a prince from the line of succession is not merely a symbolic gesture. It has deep legal, historical, and social ramifications. Meanwhile, the extended family reacted in ways that reflected their unique positions and perspectives. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and other royal relatives were informed discreetly, but their reactions, often a mix of shock, curiosity, and concern, added to the emotional landscape of the palace. For some, the move confirmed long-standing suspicions about the tension between personal choice and institutional duty. For others, it marked a moment of reckoning, forcing them to confront questions about loyalty, familial bonds, and the balance between private relationships and public responsibility. Inside the palace, meetings reportedly extended for hours, with advisors, senior family members, and legal counsel deliberating over messaging, protocols, and the broader narrative. Questions abounded. How would the media interpret the decision? How could the family maintain authority while demonstrating compassion? How could Harry's removal be framed in a way that reinforced tradition without alienating public support? Each discussion reflected the delicate interplay between historical precedent, emotional intelligence, and strategic communication, highlighting the extraordinary pressures of navigating a modern monarchy in real time. Emotional tension among the family members was palpable. While outward appearances remained composed, private moments were marked by candid conversations, moments of vulnerability, and subtle power dynamics. Observers of royal behavior noted that such decisions often reveal fault lines within the family, exposing both long-standing grievances and newly emerging tensions. In this instance, the decision to remove Harry crystallized existing conflicts, amplified insecurities, and demanded both reconciliation and strategic foresight. Experts in royal protocol emphasized that this type of removal is rare and, in modern history, effectively unprecedented in its public impact. Legal scholars, historians, and commentators weighed in, providing analysis on historical context, potential constitutional implications, and the symbolic weight of the move. The convergence of these perspectives highlighted the intersection of personal decisions with institutional norms, illustrating how deeply intertwined private emotion and public perception are within the monarchy. Public perception, naturally, was a critical concern for the family. Advisors were acutely aware that any misstep in messaging could trigger criticism, speculation, or even international scrutiny. Social media had already erupted with a mixture of shock, condemnation, and support, underscoring the challenge of controlling narrative in an age where information flows instantaneously and global audiences interpret events through diverse lenses. The royal family's internal deliberations, therefore, were as much about anticipating reactions as they were about managing internal dynamics. Amid this backdrop, internal morale and personal relationships were tested. Senior staff, accustomed to managing routine royal affairs, suddenly found themselves navigating uncharted territory. They had to provide reassurance, counsel, and strategic guidance while simultaneously processing their own reactions to a moment that challenged the traditional order of succession. For many, the experience reinforced the delicate balance between duty, loyalty, and personal conviction, a balance that, in this instance, was under intense pressure. Throughout this period, discreet communication channels were maintained with Harry and Meghan. While formal channels were dominated by protocol and legal considerations, private conversations allowed for emotional expression, negotiation, and reflection. Sources suggest that these communications were measured, careful, and emotionally complex, reflecting the gravity of the situation and the intricate web of relationships at play. This chapter highlights not only the procedural and strategic dimensions of the royal family's response, but also the deeply human aspects of navigating an unprecedented moment in history. It captures the tension, deliberation, and emotional nuance that define the family's immediate reaction, setting the stage for subsequent developments in which public perception, personal reflection, and institutional authority would collide in increasingly dramatic ways. The internal fallout within the palace would ripple outward, influencing media narratives, public sentiment, and the unfolding strategies of both Harry and Meghan. Every private conversation, every decision about protocol, and every strategic communication would contribute to a story that was as much about personal emotion as it was about history, law, and tradition. In understanding the royal family's response, viewers gain insight into the complexity of leadership, legacy, and the extraordinary pressures faced by individuals whose lives are both intensely personal and profoundly public. As news of Prince Harry's removal from the line of succession broke, it ignited a firestorm across the global media landscape. From the bustling newsrooms of London to the cable networks of New York, from social media platforms buzzing with millions of reactions to tabloid headlines screaming controversy, the story dominated every corner of public attention. Unlike most royal announcements, which are carefully orchestrated and often gradual, this unprecedented decision created an immediate, visceral reaction, with journalists, commentators, and everyday audiences alike scrambling to interpret its meaning and consequences. Within minutes, breaking news alerts flooded mobile devices around the world. Leading newspapers and online media outlets posted banner headlines detailing the decision, emphasizing its historic significance, its shock value, and the implications for the monarchy. Analysts and royal correspondents offered live commentary, speculating on the reasons behind the move, the potential reactions of Harry and Meghan, and the likely fallout for King Charles, Prince William, and the rest of the royal family. Across continents, the story became a lens through which people debated issues of power, tradition, and the intersection of personal agency with institutional expectation. Social media platforms became particularly influential in shaping public discourse. Millions of users shared posts, images, and memes, some sympathetic to Harry, portraying him as a victim of an archaic system, while others supported the monarchy, framing the decision as necessary to preserve tradition and order. Viral threads dissected every aspect of the news, from the wording of official statements to the potential implications for future generations. Influencers and opinion leaders weighed in, drawing in audiences who may never have followed royal affairs closely, but were instantly captivated by the drama and emotional intensity of the moment. News outlets approached the story from multiple angles. Traditional British papers like The Times, The Telegraph, and The Guardian provided historical context, examining precedent and legal frameworks, while also offering human interest stories about Harry's life and Meghan's influence within the royal family. American media networks, such as CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, highlighted the spectacle and drama, framing the story as both a personal family crisis and a global news event. European outlets offered analyses on how the monarchy's credibility, public perception, and institutional authority might be affected, linking the story to broader themes of tradition versus modernity.